Welcome, everyone, and thanks for your patience in the waiting room. It's so lovely to see so many of you joining us this afternoon for the first shift session, Equity in Action, Real Stories and Real Progress. For those of you that don't know me, I'm Mel Bound, and I'm really pleased to be with you today as your host for the very first session in our new virtual series from IWG. For those of you that don't know me and the many hats I wear in women's sport, as well as supporting IWG with all things digital, I'm the CEO and founder of This Woman Runs, where we work to break down barriers to participation for women at grassroots level. I also serve as a board member for Sport England, and I'm a non-executive director for This Girl Can, where through uniting the movement, we're working to shift systems and challenge inequality across the broader sport and movement landscape. So this work matters to me massively personally because I've seen both the transformational power of sport for women on the ground and the ways that it still leaves far too many women and girls out. So these conversations that we're going to be having over the next few months are all about changing that, and I'm really excited to be hosting them. The Shift Session series has been designed to move us from awareness and talking about things and conversation to action and change. They're intended to be a space for really honest, often long overdue dialogue with global voices, and they're part of our journey towards the IWG Global Summit in July 2026, which we'll be telling you more about very soon. So each of our 6 shift sessions will explore a key theme from the summit, including investment, leadership, visibility, innovation, and participation. And IWG will also be offering an ongoing space to continue the conversations, to share ideas, to learn, reflect, and take action through our new LinkedIn community, which hopefully lots of you have joined. Today's session will last around an hour. We're recording it. We'll share the video and the transcript next week via the LinkedIn group. So anyone that's not able to join us today will be able to watch back. We'll also capture any questions that we don't get to live today and follow up on those after the session. We're joined today by attendees from across the world. We're so pleased to see the attendee list for all of you that have registered. So we've got people with us today from across the UK, from Australia, from Canada, from Fiji, Botswana, Cameroon, Germany, Spain, Switzerland, and more. And I think it's this global network that's one of the most unique and special parts of the work that IWG does, connecting people, connecting organisations from all around the world that are driving equity in sport. So thank you so much for joining us. It's great to have you here, and we hope you really enjoy the next hour. So today, as I say, kicks off the series, and we're joined by 3 brilliant leaders whose organisations are doing absolutely fantastic work in this space. All 3 organisations are signatories of the IWG Brighton and Helsinki Declaration. For those of you that don't know what that is, it's a global commitment to advancing gender equity in sport and physical activity. It was first launched in 1994 and is now supported by more than 600 signatories worldwide. It sets out really clear principles for inclusive leadership, participation, visibility, and opportunity. And signing the declaration is more than just symbolic. It signals a genuine public commitment to drive change, to really embed equity into strategy and systems, and to be accountable for progress. So with all of that in mind, a huge welcome to today's 3 guests. We have Fiona Kidd, Head of International Development from World Sailing. We have Keenese Chairperson and from Women in Sport Botswana. And we have Hugh Brasher, CEO from London Marathon Events. So before we dive into our conversation, we've got tons of questions to ask these guys. I'd love to give each of our guests a moment just to introduce themselves and tell us a little bit more about the work of their organisation. So Fiona, if we could come to you first.
Hello, good morning, or good afternoon, and good evening. Good morning to all of you. It's great to be here. Thank you for having me here at the seminar, at the webinar. I'm the head of international development at World Sailing. World Sailing is the international federation and governing body of the sport of sailing on a global scale or globally. Our focus is on my focus is actually to lead the initiatives and aimed at expanding the global access to sailing and fostering innovation across the sport, sailing, and development landscape. My personal role is I've spent the last 30 years of my professional life in focused on women and youth in sports. So sailing has been I've done it since my young childhood. It's a passion of mine, and it's a thrill to be here in this role at World Sailing to bring all that experience, my past experience, together to for the future of the sport. So it's a pleasure to be here. So thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Fiona. And Keenese, could you do the same, please?
Thank you so much. Greetings, everyone. As introduced, my name is Keenese Katisenge. I'm the chairperson of Women and Sport Botswana, popularly known as WASBO. We are responsible for, at the national level, retention and attraction of women and girls in sport in Botswana. We work with a national executive committee. We have regions that become critical for our implementation, ensuring that our mandate reaches the different districts within the country. At a higher level, we advocate for policy. We advocate for equitable distribution of resources. We also have taken a route of data-driven decision-making in terms of ensuring that we conduct studies at the national level. I'm very happy to be here.
Thank you so much. And I just wanted to say, when we were asking our panelists to give us a short quote that summed up how they felt about today's panel and the work of IWG over the next 12 months, Keenese's quote was, "If not now, then when?" And I just thought that was absolutely fantastic. I think lots of us watching today and doing this work feel very much the same. So welcome, really happy to have you with us today. And Hugh, over to you.
Yeah, I'm Hugh Brasher, the CEO of London Marathon Events. We put on about 20 of the largest mass participation sports events in the UK and the world. So the London Marathon this year was the largest marathon in the world ever. I'm also one of the board members of London Athletics Meeting, which is the largest one-day athletics meeting in the world, and also of the European Athletic Championships 2026. I think more importantly, though, I am the son of the winner of the Women's French Open in 1957 in the singles, and the doubles and the mixed in 1958. So that was my mother, Shirley Bloomer, at the time, and the proud father of two daughters, Sky and Rosie, aged 12 as of Thursday and 15.
I didn't know that about your mum. That's amazing. Really happy to have you here. Great. Okay, so where I thought we would start today is grounding our discussion in the shared commitment that each of your organisations has already made in this space in signing the Brighton and Helsinki Declaration. So Fiona, if we could come to you first. World Sailing was one of the very, very first signatories of the declaration. And I wondered whether you could talk a little bit about how that early commitment evolved into your current strategy, and particularly the action plan that you're currently delivering as an organisation.
Yes, it was 25 years ago, if not more. 1997 is when World Sailing, at the time the name was the ISAF, which is the International Sailing Federation, signed the declaration and we were very, very early at adopting it. And it really did change and transform our sport. The woman that was leading this whole sort of strategy or initiative was a woman from Italy, Nucinovi Seppellini, and she was just a driving force of getting this done. We didn't really see impact into that until about 2004, when I'll just go back a little bit. Our first event that was in the Olympics, the women's event, was in 1988. We had 11% of women in that championship in 88. So it took to 2004 to really start making an impact. But by then we had 35% women in the sailing competition at the Olympics. And it took us 20 years to get to where we are today. So that sort of gives you the timeline, is that during that period of the 2000s, we fumbled a lot as an organization. We made some bad decisions. We changed equipment 4 times in 12 years. The women really we all struggled to figure out how this was all going to work, but the initiative and the commitment was there. And but by 2024 we have made parity, and it also led us to, that's parity when I mean at the Olympics in Paris 24 we had equal events and equal number of athletes. So for us that was a huge accomplishment, but it took time and it took commitment and it took buying in from different groups as to how to get there and when to get there. But it did spawn our latest strategy called Steering the Course, and it's World Sailing's Action Plan for Women in the Sport. And that was published last year, and that has set targets for us. I think what we're finding is when we set these targets, we can actually achieve them. And it's an incredible document that actually uses, the Brighton and Helsinki Declaration as a core document in the development of that strategy. And it really is driving all of our decision making going forward and the things that we're trying to do with our sport. But it did take time, but these things don't take time. It does take to get them to fruition. But for us, it was a game changer of signing that Brighton Declaration way back in 1997. So we're glad to be where we are here, but there's more to do. There's always more to do. It's never over.
When you shared that story with me last week, Fiona, I was reminded of a quote that I made a note of for today's session, and that's: the sooner you accept it's going to take longer than you want, the sooner it happens faster than you expect.
That's a great quote.
Well, that sums up everything that World Sailing's done, and you kind of intent, and it definitely is going to take longer than you think, but as soon as you start to take those steps and put all of the building blocks in place, then it happens faster. Even if it's 20 years.
Took 20 years, but we got there. We're not there yet, but we got to where we wanted to. Yeah.
Fantastic. Keenese, coming to you next. Now, WASBO signed in 2018, and Botswana also were the hosts of IWG between 2014 and 2018. And I just wondered whether you could talk about, I guess, the long-term engagement and the commitment to IWG and the principles of IWG, and how that's influenced some of your leadership and advocacy and the great work that's happening in Botswana.
Yes, thank you so much. For us, it was very important to be a signatory, because we believe that it's not only important for individuals to have accountability partners, but also for organizations to have accountability partners. Because if you assess the space that we operate in of equity and gender equality and largely of advocacy, sometimes we are more around the talk and the promises and less on action. So signing the declaration really allows us to have a platform where we can report, where we can ensure monitoring and accountability. And we had also attended the IWG conference in Finland as a build-up towards us as Botswana hosting the IWG conference in 2018. And becoming a signatory has really made some strides for us as a country. We are not where we want to be, or where we are supposed to be yet, but there is a lot that we have achieved, and we are confident that because advocacy really and equity requires change of mindset and continuous advocacy, we will get there eventually, but it will take some time. We signed the IWG plus the Brighton plus Helsinki Declaration, and in 2018, Botswana, for the first time in history, introduced we introduced the agenda and sport strategy, which is basically a gender mainstreaming strategy for us as sport. It's a strategy that will be going into its next phase of review, but it's really a document that has really guided a lot of implementation that we have done as a country. From signing the gender and sport strategy, we're introducing it. We were able to, in 2020, introduce a sexual harassment policy as part of implementation of that strategy. Furthermore, we also contributed to the introduction and implementation of a diversity and inclusion policy for the Botswana National Sport Commission, which we believe is a very important contribution for us as WASBO from a implementation of the commitments of the declaration perspective. In the 2017-2018 financial year, we were able to take a bold step and conducted a national data collection or a survey. And this is a survey that is now guiding from a data-driven decision-making, our implementation, our formation of strategies, And that was largely from the contribution of the declaration, being a signatory, and also from the influence and impact of us having hosted the IWG, because there were build-up activities even towards the conference. We were able also to convert as Women and Sport Botswana from being a substructure. In history, as part of our introduction, we were a substructure of the Botswana National Sport Commission. We are now a society which has upgraded our level in terms of recognition in the society and also in the sports sector. We also have a Botswana National Sport Commission Act, which is classified as the BNSC Act. And that act also in 2014, when it was introduced, catered for inclusion of WASBO in terms of board representation and heavy women in leadership positions. So these are some of the outcomes and part of us introducing and implementing the commitments of the declaration, and also some legacies from the IWG pre, during, and post. And the major one that we believe has also been a big achievement for us as a sport in Botswana. During the restructuring exercise of the Botswana National Sport Commission, there was advocacy to ensure that the organizational structure caters for positions and officer roles that will look at diversity and inclusion, and that was taken into consideration, and that has been implemented. I'm just emphasizing this achievement so that we can see and appreciate the importance of being signatories to the declaration, and ensuring that while there are challenges towards achieving the numbers that we need, there are some other aspects that we can ensure we achieve on.
That's just, I hope everyone listening is as equally as inspired as I feel listening to just the incredible level of work and the layers and the detail of work that you as an organization and country have achieved over the last period of time, and the role that signing the declaration has played in that commitment. And actually, ahead of today's session, we had a number of questions submitted from other attendees today from around Africa that have got specific questions for you. So we'll come to those later on. I know that your work's incredibly inspiring.
Okay, thank you.
So Hugh, coming to you, your London Marathon is one of our IWG's most recent signatories. And so I wondered whether you could talk a little bit to how the kind of the formal commitment has built on London Marathon's long-standing work around inclusion and equity.
Yeah, so I think, you know, whether this is saying the right thing or not, but this is the truth. We really didn't know anything about the Brighton-Helsinki Agreement until you came up and told us about it. And immediately, of course, we would sign it because it's at the heart of everything that we do. And I think that if you just go to the London Marathon as our signature event, and my father was the co-founder with John Disley back in 1981, then there were less than 5% of the finishers in the London Marathon were women. And unbelievably, in the Olympics, women weren't even allowed to run over 3,000 meters because it was considered dangerous for them. And the first women's marathon took place. The first time women were allowed to run the marathon in the Olympics, unbelievably, was 1984. And you just have to remind yourself that the craziness of the world that we've been inhabiting. And so what we passionately believe in is collaboration, in learning from each other. And it's as simple as that. By joining, we're joining a network that can help us, while athletics and road running is actually generally, in terms of women's participation, in terms of equity and prize money, is generally in a good place. There are so many places with children, teenagers, in just the access to sport, the access to activity, keeping girls involved in it, and just learning and seeing how much we have to do. It inspires us to go further and try and do it faster than we'd previously thought.
Yeah, there's a common theme here of everything taking time and taking longer than we would like, isn't there? Before we move on to the next set of questions, I just wanted to let everyone listening know that we've got time at the end for a Q&A. So as we go through the session, if there are particular questions that crop up from things that the panelists are sharing or talking through, then do drop those into the Q&A. There's a little button hopefully at the bottom of your screen you can click on and submit a question, and we'll try and get through as many as we can of those as we go or at the end. Okay, so we're going to dive into an area now which is really about practical action. So thinking about how you can move from making a commitment and investing in equity to actually turning that into action in practice and delivering real impact. So Fiona, I'd like to come to you first and talk a little bit about, for World Sailing, a little bit about education and digital access and and initiatives like the World Sailing Academy, and how those initiatives are helping you to close that equity gap globally in sailing. You're on mute, Fiona.
Yeah. Thank you for that. We just launched it yesterday, so it's hot off the press.
Okay.
So it is live, and it's been a huge project for us, but it really is strategically set that we want to do this because we want to increase and scale the access of education. I'm personally, it's a big believer that knowledge is the great equalizer. If you have knowledge, then you can learn. We have a sport that's it's very technical. It's equipment oriented, but it's also very difficult from just the game of going around and sailing. It's more difficult than other sports. So knowledge is really, really important to enable people to have access to how the sport actually works. And so it's really the academy that we have launched is really to provide easy access to that knowledge, and it's a resource hub so people can go and find out information about the sport and so on and so forth. So we're very excited about that, and we've had a quick uptake today, so we hopefully that is being received by many of our sailors around the world. But it's also to reduce the barriers. I think I think in all sport, this is not just a sailing issue. It's an issue across many sports, is reducing those barriers, giving access to the sport, inclusion, making sure that more people can actually get into the sport. So those are all things that sport are challenged with. And so this was a big initiative. And also the other part of it is, we're in a world of, we are all trying to keep young into our sports. Again, it's an issue that's common to all sports, is how do you keep the young engaged in your sport? So using digital tools to actually get access to them, to actually get into the learning and courses, is actually going to help that group, that younger group that we need to keep in the sport. And and hopefully that's going to enable them to enjoy it, find out more. This also platform allows us to do a lot more online coaching. So that's another part of it, is that it enables us to create little groups that we can get coaching. And so that online coaching and having videos and sharing with those athletes is another really important part, because remote coaching is really the future of our sport. We go into regions around the world, and they just don't have access to coaching. They don't have access to that aspect of the sport. So coaching is a really big part of this online learning platform, which we hope to grow and bring more courses on, and so on and so forth. So yes, for us, those digital tools are going to be critical for us to scale our sport and to actually reach regions around the world that can enable us to grow. So we're very excited about it, but it's early days, but we're very excited.
Revisit this conversation in 12 months and have a conversation
yes.
about and challenges. I'm sure there'll be challenges along the way as well, and learning. So perhaps next year. Thank you for sharing that. Hugh, if I could come to you now and talk about some of the initiatives that London Marathon has championed around inclusive campaigns and equal prize money, etc. And I just wondered whether you could talk a little bit to what initiative or what investment has driven the biggest impact or the greatest learning in terms of this equity space.
Yeah, look, I think to try and pull out one campaign, one initiative is not really where we've come from. What we're trying to do is do masses of things and create more impact through scale. And we were the first events company to have parity on prize money between wheelchair competitors and able-bodied competitors. That created, it's £55,000 to win the London Marathon if you've won it through racing in a chair, if you've won it through racing as an able-bodied competitor. There are lots of little initiatives, whether it's engaging with Cycling Sisters, so it's a charity group encouraging Muslim women to cycle. And there's huge differences in cycling between men and women. It's really roughly a split of 85% male, 15% female. One of the things that we learned, we organised an event called Ride London, and we brought in a women's professional cycling event, and we were the first company in cycling to offer parity on prize money in cycling. And the fact that I think it's always been parity in the London Marathon since 1981, to find that we were the first company ever to do it in 2013 actually shocked us hugely. So I think that it's really just having at the heart your value and in your values that there should be equality, that often to get equality that you need to do it through equity, and just to be passionate about it and trying to get it across an organization rather than, yes, it has to come from leadership, but it also, you want it to come from within the culture of the organization. And we have an executive leadership team that was parity male, female, then went slightly towards male, now probably is going to go slightly towards female. So it really is just ensuring that we have the right mix of males and females at the top of the position in London Marathon events, and that this is really truly part of our values as an organization.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks so much for that, Hugh. Keenese, coming to you now, thinking from a kind of country level, with a country level lens, and thinking about the systems of support that you're building for girls and women that last well beyond short-term project cycles, particularly in under-resourced environments. I'm wondering whether you could talk a little bit to some of the priorities and some of the commitments that you've made as WASBE.
Yes, thank you. So what we realized and we decided to change our approach as was that running impactful, because it doesn't give the opportunity to come up with a continuous improvement that aligns with the necessary impact that you want to make. The other thing is, as an organization, we are currently run by volunteers at the national level. So that's also a risk in terms of us moving away from such a system in a very strategic manner, ensuring that we allow for integration of sustainability within our documents and within our programming, so that even as volunteers, if we move out of office, those who come after us are able to take over and there's continuation. So that is the approach that we have done. We have also ensured that even in terms of the programs or initiatives that we run with our national and international partners, there is that integration. If I can give an example of the latest project that we are currently running, is the Girls Positive and Safe Coaching Pathway that we are running in collaboration with the Association for International Sport for All, popularly known as TAFISA. So the approach that we are taking is to ensure that the trainers, the coaches that we use, also integrate the pathway modules within their deliverables at their national sport associations and at their clubs. So that takes the responsibility of only relying on WASBO for integration, but ensuring that the national federations, the clubs and the individual trainers and the coaches on the ground ensure integration and sustainability and continuation of our initiatives. What we have also done and what we continue to advocate for, is not that when we advocate and initiatives are introduced, automatically we see results or there's compliance from the relevant bodies to the initiatives that have been introduced. But even from a funding perspective, what we have advocated for at the national level is for the Botswana National Sport Commission to ensure that the funding model also takes into consideration aspect of equity, and ensuring that the tier system that we currently use in the country also takes that into consideration, because it's a model that is used long-term in terms of funding. So if the funding takes that into consideration, if the programming takes that into consideration, for example, your Zebra Fund, your Elite Fund, other scholarship opportunities that we offer as a country, we have ensured that the diversity and inclusion policy of the BNSC, the operationalization framework of it, reviews all the BNSC programs, and also goes down to ensuring that the sport officers are tasked with ensuring that they also do assessment at National Sport Federation level, so that there is an upward and downward trickling of that integration and sustainability approach towards what we do as a country. So it's a new approach that we started 2 years ago. We are hoping that when we do our next review and assessment holistically at the national level, the integration approach will demonstrate that it's bearing fruits. But we really want what we do to be integrated at national level by the federation, and also at local level by the districts through our regions and the clubs.
Gosh, and that leads us on really nicely actually to the next set of questions, which are really around the challenges in this work, which you know, as we're already uncovering, are immense and take sometimes decades to overcome. So I'm wondering, Keenese, if you could just build a little bit on that answer, thinking about how you can put something in place but then maintain both momentum and influence without necessarily having that consistent institutional support. Could you talk us through that a little bit?
Okay, there are a lot of challenges, and one of them is funding. What we had also noted through assessments that we had done was that the funding, even from the private sector, was largely going towards male-dominated sport, and less was going towards female sport. And at an organizational level as well, what we took was the approach of not looking for support and funding only locally, but also looking for support at regional and international level. And we were lucky to also get some support from the Anita White Foundation, from IWG, and also currently from Tafisa. So that allows us to, because we are a small country, and as a small constituent as sport, we also tap into the same organizations when we look at private sector support. So looking broader and not only limiting yourself nationally is one recommendation that we also give the National Sport Federation, so that we are able to move away from the funding challenge. We know that there are global challenges currently that are also even impacting global movements and organizations in terms of their ability to fund even NGOs, but that is the approach that we have taken. The other thing was, we have decided that when we talk about challenges that we are faced with in sport, we are able to talk from facts and from data. So that's why we have made it a point that every 2 years we are able to collect the data at a national level, so that whatever we say is guided by facts or is guided by what the stakeholders have communicated. And we did that in 2017-2018 financial year. We did that in the 2022-23 financial year, and we'll be doing that in the 25-26 financial year. So the challenges are there, but it's the creative approach towards that. The major challenge that we are faced with right now for us is the numbers. The numbers, when you look at the athletes on the ground, even when you look at the last team that represented Botswana at the Olympics, we had fewer numbers of female representation compared to the previous cohorts that we had sent to the Olympics. So that is a major concern for us. And we are currently working closely with the ministry and other relevant associations to see how we work together towards coming up with long-term programs, not once-off, that can allow us to ensure that there is long-term, an approach of long-term athletes development, because we don't provide the technical expertise. We provide advocacy and speaking for them to the relevant bodies and authorities, but we rely largely on the expert, which is the national federations and the relevant clubs, to give us the necessary challenges that they have, so that we are able to speak in the relevant boardrooms for those challenges to be addressed. And we are also currently looking at or advocating for introduction of a national safeguarding policy for us as a country, because there are also some safeguarding concerns that have come from the different forums that we have hosted at WASPO to get such. And we believe that if policies come from the government and they go down and trickle down to national federations and to the clubs, there is more compliance, because we are largely relying on government for funding, and government can use non-compliance as a punitive measure to ensure that there is compliance to policies and regulations. And we can work together towards ensuring that there's a safer environment that can allow for more attraction and retention of women and girls in sport. I hope I have answered your question. Thank you.
That was brilliant, and again, I think that's a whole session in its own right to dive into that in more detail. I'd love to do that at some point. Actually, one of the things I wanted to pick up and ask of you, Fiona, with World Sailing, is the point that you've made around understanding the technical requirements for different sports. And Fiona, I know that you've shared that that although there's equity in those Olympic events, the women still remain underrepresented when you're looking at the more technical roles in sailing. So I wonder a little bit around that as a challenge and what needs to shift and how you're going about tackling that.
Yes, that's a really interesting challenge for us. I mean, again, you know, we've made parity on the athlete side and that sort of thing, but we, as a sport, technically, we are not meeting our targets. And I think that what we're doing is, first of all, we've set targets in leadership, and those have been met. We're meeting those leadership targets in terms of what we set out in our steering the course plan. However, on the official side, which is what we call our judges, referees, that sort of thing, we're not doing very well. And for example, we only have 15% of all of our technical officials are women, and we have a goal that we want to increase all that. So we're working on two fronts on that area. One is we're in trying to grow or get more women in the international level. We have ITOs, which are international officials, and we also have national level. So there's two prongs. We have to help that top group that are in the international, but we have to grow from the base. And I think that that's what we're doing. We've implemented a national race officer training program. But I think the one area of our technical officials, not even officials, but the technical side of the sport, is our coaching. Women coaching is really, really struggling in our sport. And it's a number of reasons. I think we need to professionalize coaching more than what it already is. The men seem to be able to have professional roles, but for women and women who have got families and those challenges, it's very, very difficult to get into the sport from a coaching point of view. And we as a federation need to help those women and encourage them and open up opportunities that they are welcome into the coaching world, and that we support them in a way that supports them being away from their family. Our sport is not things, it's a week long. Our events happen over a number of days. So it's a huge commitment for a woman to make that type of commitment. And we are working with a number of women in that regard. So coaching is probably our biggest challenge of all. I know we'll make our targets on the official side. I think that's just going to take work, grassroots work, and getting coaches and clinics and reaching out to those regions and getting more women from those regions to get into the sport. And that's happening. We're doing lots of work in that level. But coaching, I think we do have technical coaches for courses for coaches, which is an Olympic Solidarity program that we're actually bringing in more women, and there is an uptake in that. So 50% of those tend to be women. So we're making progress, but again, at the high performance level, like, we just are not able to get women into our sport, not into the sport, but to make it a profession and feel that they are valued and that this is a choice that they make. The current ones that we have now are often, former Olympic sailors, and they know they've got the skill set. That's not the issue. They know the sport, they know the equipment. It's just the mindset of those people, the decision makers, to say that we want to have more women coaches in our sport. So they have to actually change their mindset as to saying, yes, women can be coaches. It's not because they're mothers, it's because they're experts in their field and we want them in the sport. So I think that's our biggest challenge in front of us, is changing the mindset that women can be high performance coaches that can help these women and girls come through the sport, because they need those girls and women need those role models in terms of their coaching, and we're lacking in that. So it's a challenge ahead of us, but we are working in that area. So we'll get there, but it's going to take a lot of investment on a number of fronts.
And I think it's an area that a lot of sports can 100% relate as well. I think they see similar work happening across the board.
Yeah.
Lots of challenges and successes to share along the way, I'm sure.
Yeah.
Hugh, if we could come to you, just thinking what now I want to move on to, just ahead of opening up the floor to any questions, is just thinking about what's coming next and thinking about priorities for the future. And I'm thinking specifically about London Marathon being so close to 50-50 parity in terms of entry. So what are your thoughts in terms of where the work goes next, whether that's internally or thinking about younger girls, or what's kind of on the plans?
Yeah, I mean, London Marathon is just one of the events that we organised. I think it was 10 days ago, we organised the first ever 3v3 basketball tournament ever taken place in Trafalgar Square, and this was targeted at 13 to 15-year-olds. And in its first pilot year, it was a partnership with the NBA. We had 37% of secondary schools taking part. And I think it really is about trying to ensure that across our events and across all ages and across all demographics, we are genuinely ensuring that we have appropriate events and appropriate facilities for women, young girls, teenagers to take part, to get involved. There's the old adage, if you don't see it, you don't believe it. And you need to tell the right stories. You need to give the right inspiration. The fact that, it's virtual parity on men's and women's in the marathon is great. Actually, across virtually all the other distances, it is more women than men. It will get there, I have absolutely no doubt. But that isn't necessarily the case in so many other sports, and we are getting involved in more and more sports, and therefore it's trying to ensure that the principle of ensuring that the sport is accessible, is having that principle embedded in everything that we do.
Can I ask you a quick question, actually, that's come from the floor around pregnancy deferrals? I know this is something that we've talked about a lot, and London Marathon's done a lot of work around really thinking about how it can support mothers to be able to defer their spaces for London Marathon and other events. So I wonder whether you could talk to a little bit about where you are now and a little bit about what the plans are for the future in that space.
Yeah, I mean, as you say, we've done an enormous amount in terms of pregnancy postpartum deferral in the London Marathon. So it is unique in that women who are pregnant, or postpartum, are able to defer for a longer period of time than anybody else. We've also done that through the championship and good for age qualification, so that actually, if you've qualified, you can still keep that qualification for a number of for a much longer period of time. So we've done a huge amount in terms of implementing facilities for breastfeeding, both at the start, through the course, and at the finish. So there's just a raft of different initiatives that we have implemented. We are continually looking at what those should be, continually weighing them up, continually looking at the principle of equity rather than equality, because you have to go for equity first. And yeah, we will continue to do that. Thanks,
Hugh. Fiona, if I could come back to you just really quickly. Around this parity question, just specifically thinking about kind of looking ahead to the LA Olympics in 2028, and I know that you've set yourself a target around Olympic officials by that milestone. So I wonder whether you could just talk a little bit about that and what it's going to take to make that both a reality, but also a legacy that goes beyond the games in 28?
Yeah, it's a little bit about what I was saying before. I mean, it is a huge goal. And again, we really have set goals and it really does drive our implementation and our strategy to meet those goals. So it's for us, it's 50% that we want officials at LA 28 up from 31%. So we know there's work to be done, and that doesn't happen, automatically. It's about, we want to make sure that the women that are in the international officials are actually performing at a high level that should be at the games. So everyone shouldn't be, you're at the games because you're a woman, you're at the games because you're the best at what you do. So we have to, really focus on making sure that those women who are already international officials are getting those opportunities to work in events that are, that can upskill them, so they can, when they're at the Olympics or when they're appointed to the Olympics, they're the best in their field. And there's no question, like there should be no questions about this person should not be here because they're not good enough. So that's a lot of work we have ahead of us, and we are partnering with our Olympic classes. We're partnering with different people to make sure that we get more opportunities for those women to actually get the skills they need. On the second pronged approach is actually this national level. It's a longer term strategy for sure, but we need more women in the pipeline. We need more women that are actually performing at a high level at the national level, so that they have opportunities and understand the pathways that, they may not be there in 2028, which is highly unlikely, but they will likely be there in 2032 if we set the pathways and make it clear that that's how they get there. And I think that that's, our long-term approach. We have a short-term immediate need that we have to upskill these international officials to a level that they deserve to be at those games and to be at the best of in their field. And then we have the second, which is that bringing that basin together so we get them for 32. So that's our goal right now, and that's how we're working at it.
It very much feels like a project. We almost like building a cathedral that won't be finished in our lifetime.
Yeah. Exactly.
Amazing.
Yeah. Well, we'll get there.
So that brings us to the end of the panel discussion part of today. So I just wanted to start by saying a huge thank you to our three panelists. I feel like we could probably do an individual session with each of you to dive into some of the topics we've skirted over today. But thank you so much for speaking so openly and honestly about the challenges as well as the the successes that you're having along the way as well. I'm going to open up to our audience. There's a few questions that have come through the Q&A that I'm going to pick up, and we'd love to take as many of those questions as we can. So if you've been making notes as we've gone through and you'd like to ask them, then put them into the Q&A chat now, and I'll get through as many of those as we can. So first question we're going to come to is around sponsorship, actually. And this is just an open. We lost Keenese. She dropped off. Oh, she's back.
Okay.
Sorry, Keenese, I didn't notice that you dropped off. I'm glad to see you back. So the question is, how can women's sport also get the much needed sponsorship? And that's from Lillian Chikara from the Special Olympics Zimbabwe. I'm not sure which of you would like to pick that one up, but I'll open it up to the floor.
Can you repeat the question again? I had cut.
How can women's sport also get the much needed sponsorship?
Okay.
$1 million question. We all want.
Yeah.
Okay. I'll go first. There are two things that in my assessment are also critical to women's sport getting the necessary support. The first one, it appears as women, we need to prove our case and the need more aggressively. Aggressive not from a fighting perspective, but from an intensity perspective, in terms of ensuring that our needs and proposals are aligned to the CSI investment policies of organizations, and ensuring that what we demonstrate as a need is aligned to the key priorities of organizations. Because when you look at most of organizations, they're looking at marginalized groups, they're looking at issues of gender equality. So it's ensuring that we package our requests and messaging in a way that really aligns with the key priorities of organizations. The other thing is how we package and the visibility of the women in sport. We need to rely on the media, but the digital transformation has also provided us with opportunities that we can use as sports administrators and leaders to ensure that in addition to rely on the media for visibility and packaging of women in sport, we are also creative and we make sure that women's sport is appealing and is packaged in a more visually appealing manner to different potential sponsors. So a lot of times we complain that the media is not profiling women, is not packaging, but we have social media, we have Instagram, we have Facebook, we have TikTok, we have your LinkedIn. So we need to also take it and make it within our hands to ensure that we are able to also do what the media can do for us, because it looks like we have to work harder to ensure that we get funding as women's sport. Thank you.
That was a brilliant answer. I actually had a follow-up question to your answer.
Yeah.
The skills needed to do that. So thinking about, you're kind of a sports organization or a sporting event or a federation that are focused on participation or athlete pathways or whatever your objectives are. And then thinking about the skill sets that are now needed within your organization to be able to create a brand around your sport that you can then package up and take out through social media channels to enable you to unlock that corporate sponsorship. So I just wondered whether you could talk a little bit to that as a challenge and maybe some of the ways that you've addressed that. Actually, that's a question to all of you, because that's
okay. I mean, I'll jump in. I think I think you sort of hit the nail on the head. I think branding is a really important part. And, as Keenese said, it's media plays a huge role, and the social media can really be that tool that can actually help the whole, getting more women to have, sponsorship, because they need to increase their profile, and companies need to see that, and they need to see that in your sport. So, yes, absolutely. Social media is a really important tool that should be using, and, branding, the sport, branding what you're doing will only help, those potential sponsors want to be associated with you. I think there's a lot of association about inclusion, and I think there's lots of special sponsors out there that really want to be in that EDI space. And I think women are in that space more potentially than men. I think you could potentially align with potential sponsors about that, and sort of, that we want women to be included. It's about, equality, diversity, inclusion, and there are sponsors that are in that corporate space that want to be associated with that. So that's another angle that you can take for that sort of sponsorship.
If I can just build on that, because I think the challenges are huge, and the challenges are different in every single country. With what's going on in America and the politics around DEI at the moment, it's not a space I would want to be in personally. But I think that where we've had success is when it's about selling a vision. And as Fiona was saying, it's you find organizations that believe in a vision, believe in you delivering that vision, want to go on that journey with you to deliver that vision, and believe that the societal change that is required is that they can make a difference through what they're doing. And I think that generally very few people disagree with a vision. What we disagree is about how to deliver the vision. So stay away from maybe how you're going to deliver it, but that you still need to be able to answer those questions. But really try and tie into the story, the belief, the power of the conviction for what you have, and the need for the societal change that has to happen.
Yeah, absolutely right, Hugh. And that piece, what you've just said about storytelling as well is such a key part of that. As you were talking, I was thinking about the women's rugby player Alona Mar and the amazing job she's done on social media of building her profile through storytelling. And that's, one of the many skills that athletes and sports are having to pick up, as well as everything else at the moment. I've got two final questions. They're two quite different questions, but we'll try and ask both of them before we finish. And one was around menstruation and the work that's happening globally to promote good menstrual health in sport. and whether we believe this is a bigger piece worldwide or more sports specific to drive forward female health and participation. No, it's a big question.
Can you ask it again?
Yeah, it's almost a two-pronged question. Yeah.
Here, I think this is from Emily Devine. Thank you, Emily, for this question. It's an important one. I wanted to ask a question around menstruation. What are we doing globally to promote good menstrual health in sports, and how much do we actually know about it? Do you believe this is a bigger piece worldwide or more sports specific to drive forward female health?
Okay, if I can speak from an angle of what we are doing. Because from the research that we had conducted, there was a demonstration that menstrual health was a key contributor to ensuring that we are able to retain, because the indication was that we were struggling with retention of the girl child in sport. And further assessment indicated that when a girl child reaches the poverty stage, when they start getting the menstrual cycle, some of them decline or drop out of sport. So what we did was to partner with Tafisa, like I've indicated previously, that we have a girls positive and safe coaching pathway that also has a menstrual health as a module, where we are empowering coaches and teaching coaches on how to handle menstrual health. Because the other aspect was that majority of our coaches are male, and if they are not educated and empowered to know how to deal with such topics and how to deal with such occurrences when they happen to a girl child, a lot of girl child are going to drop out. What we also did was to ensure that most of the coaches that we are also empowering, we are attracting also female coaches, because the indication is that if there is a female coach, if a girl child reaches that stage, they are more comfortable to talk and open up to a female coach as opposed to a male coach. So those are some of the elements that we are putting in place and ensuring that there are experts that we bring into the field from a scientific perspective to also help us to address these aspects. The other thing, we went beyond just the sports sector and tapped into the parents. We have a program last year we did the Bontleng community in another community in Maui and Pigwe, where we are also educating the parents so that they are also able to become our ambassadors at home, so that when a girl child reaches the menstrual health or menstrual cycle stage, they don't drop out of school. A parent is also empowered to also assist us to know that when a girl child is going for training, they are packed sanitary pads that they may need and other things. Right now, we are working on a program that will be launching soon, where we'll be providing sanitary pads to national teams. We'll start with the youth national teams and then progress to the senior national teams. So at the moment, those are some of the aspects that we are putting in place. But menstrual health, to confirm, is a key contributor to the retention and attraction of a girl child in sport, and is a topical topic that really requires the attention that it deserves. Thank you.
Absolutely, and the kind of what you've just been talking through around the importance of coach education and having more women in coaching as well is so core to that. And thinking through, both the dropout from sport, but also, to be able to develop training programs in line with menstrual cycles, and thinking about the impact of training at different stages of your menstrual cycle on the risk of injury, etc. Hugh, I just wondered whether you could talk really briefly about some of the things. I'm thinking about running more generally, about some of the things that are happening in and around the sport that support women to be able to, turn up to races and continue training throughout their cycles.
Yeah, I mean, in terms of what we've done is try and ensure that there are sanitary towels available throughout our events, so that they're at water stations through the route. I think, going back to the original question, I think there is a massive lack of medical research that has been properly thought through, and look, I'm very aware I am a male white privileged person sitting here talking, and I'm enormously aware of that. But my wife is a natural health practitioner, and she educates me quite a lot, it is just societally a travesty on the inequality that exists through research and development. There is not one size fits all. There is not one single thing that is. It's not trying to say that all women menstruate at the same rate, at the same. It is just or have the same effect on their bodies. Everybody is uniquely different. But should there be proper research done? 100% yes. And I think that going back to why we joined up, it's about how you can bring people together and what action you can take together. And whether that action is to start to create a fund that's going to start the research, whatever it might be. I'm very much an action-orientated person. And I think that's what London Marathon Events has been particularly renowned for, is people ask us to do things and we get on and do them. So I do think that together it is about what action needs to be taken, and we can't wait for governments, we can't wait for national federations. We've just got to do it ourselves.
We all heard. I don't know. I think we need a whole other conversation about this in the LinkedIn group. Fiona, is there anything you wanted to add to that from a sailing perspective?
I'm embarrassed to say that we don't talk enough about it, and we do have that situation where our athletes start. I mean, we're in a lifelong lifestyle sport, so it's the kids start very young, and then they go. We can sail all their life at a very high end competitive level, but at youth we do have a considerable dropout of girls, and that is a very much a major part of it, that they start to change, they menstruate, and in our sport they're on the water for they could be on the water for 6 hours. So it's a big thing that they are, these young kids that sail these little boats, Optimist dinghies, they're in their age from they're from 8 to 15, and absolutely they're in that's happening to their bodies, and they leave. And I think that we need to there needs to be more research. We need to do more for those young girls to make sure that they stay in the sport. So I agree with Keenese and with Hugh. It's a retention issue. We're losing people because we're not tackling this head on. This is an issue, and we need to get research, and we need to and put in place that it's common conversation with us in the sport, but it isn't in our sport. And I think that, I hate to say that, but that's the truth. So yes, it's an issue, and I think we should all be addressing it and put research into it. Yeah.
I think everyone out there listening, I'm sure, is scribbling notes on that particular point, because I think it's it's recognized as a shared challenge, really cross-sport, isn't it?
Yeah.
So I'm very conscious I've gone 5 minutes over. I've tried really hard to keep us to time, but I just want to, as I wrap up, just want to really thank our amazing panelists for sharing your time, your experience, your wisdom with us today, and also to everyone that's been listening in, asking questions. We've by no means got through all the questions, so we'll make sure as a team that we take a note of those and come back to you after the session. I think I've made a note of some of the key things that I've heard today, and I think what all of you have said really is that progress is definitely not linear. It definitely takes time, sometimes decades, and that what's really driving the change, though, is the kind of starting with that commitment at a top level, but then through creativity and connection and joining the dots through the system and all of those building blocks, that's where real change starts to happen over time. And that's what we hope these shift sessions will be all about as well. So we're starting the conversations in these sessions, but we intend to continue those conversations and move those conversations into action that really shifts the bar within our LinkedIn community and at the summit in 2026. So if you've listened in today and you haven't joined the IWG LinkedIn community yet, then make sure you do so. We'll definitely be continuing some of these conversations that we've had today there in that space. We'll also share the recording and the transcript, and we'll do some translations of the transcript as well in the LinkedIn group. And then the final thing to say is just a date for your diary, which is the next shift session which is on the 17th of September. That session is focused on leadership, and we'll be sharing some more information on that really soon. So I hope you've enjoyed it on behalf of all of us on the panel. It's been really fantastic to spend an hour with you. Thank you again. And to all of you out there, keep leading the shift.